Baruch Hashem. Let's go to chapter 27. I want to talk about the blessing of Isaac, that Isaac gave this blessing. Chapter 27, he intended to give the blessing to Esau, or did he? And he gave it to Jacob. This is a tricky question. There's a lot going on in this passage. So let me first summarize it, and then let's flesh out some of the questions in this passage, and then let's just try to come to some sort of understanding about what's going on here. And this is one of the best stories in the Torah for, to flesh it out. It's always a lot of fun. So it says that just to summarize what's going on, is that when Yitzchak grew older and his eyesight grew weak, he calls his son Esau, his older son, and he says, "My son," he says, "here I am." And he says, "Behold, I'm old, I'm about to die, or today, I don't know when I will die. Go catch me some game and make me food like I like and bring it to me, and I'll bless you, because I want to bless you before I die." Chapter 27. Now Rivka heard this, and Rivka heard this, and Rivka said to Yaakov, "I heard what your father has said, so instead, I want you to go and go get some kids, and I want you to prepare them for food before I die, lest I die. And now I want you to go and you prepare those foods just like he likes them, and bring them to your father, and that way he should bless you before he dies." Now when Yaakov heard this, he said, "Wait, my brother is very hairy and I'm smooth. Maybe my father will feel me, and then I'll be in his eyes like a trickster, and he'll bring me a curse and not a blessing." And his mother said, "Your curse is upon me, my son. Listen to my voice and go." So Jacob went and he did this, and they prepared the food, and he comes to his father and he says to his father, "I'm here." And he says, "Who are you?" And he says to his father, "I am Esav is your firstborn," or "I am Esav your firstborn. I did just like you told me. Now get up and sit down and eat from the game so that you can bless me." And then Yitzchak felt Jacob, and he said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob. The hands are the hands of Esau," and he did not recognize him because his hands were like hairy like Esau. Excuse me. And so then he blessed him. And he said, "Are you my son Esau?" And he said, "I am." And he came close again, and he kissed him, and he smelled his clothes, and he blessed him. And what was the blessing? That you should have from the dew of the heaven and the fat of the earth, and you shall have a lot of wine and grain, and the nations will serve you, and the nations will bow down to you, and you will be a nobleman to your brother, and the children of your mother will bow down. Those who curse you will be cursed, those who bless you will be blessed. And then, of course, when Jacob goes out, he exits right. Esau comes in, and when Esau comes in and he offers him food, Yitzchak says, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm your son Esau." And now Isaac trembled. He was afraid. He wasn't afraid when he was on the Akedah about to be sacrificed, but now he's afraid very much. And he said, "Who's then the one who just brought me this game and I ate from it before just a while ago, and I blessed him?" And then he says these words, which are very enigmatic. He says, "Also he will be blessed." What's going on there? And when Esau heard this, Esau cried a tremendous cry. And he cried a tremendous cry, and he says to his father, "Bless me also." And his father said, "Your brother came b'mirma," which technically means deceit. Rashi says wisdom, and he took your blessing. And Esau said, "This is why he's called Yaakov, because he's now tricked me twice. He took my firstborn, he bought, and now he also took my blessing." And he said to his father, "Did you not save me at least one blessing?" And Yitzchak answered, and he said to his father, Yitzchak answered, he said to Esav, but I made him, the Lord over you. And I gave him all your brothers to be servants. And I gave him the grain and the wine. What can I do for you then? So Esav said, do you not have one blessing for me, father? And he cried. And Yitzchak said, okay, I'll give to you from the fat of the land and from the dew of the heaven, and you shall live by the sword, and your brother you shall serve. And when he goes down, and you throw off your yoke from your neck. So this is the blessings. There's a lot of questions. I'm going to throw out a few questions, but there are just some basic questions to the story that we read every year that you just wonder about. You say, wait 1 second, why is this going on? How does this make sense? I'll start with a few questions, and I'd like to hear some of what you think, just not answers, just basic questions about this text. Some basic questions are, firstly, how could Yitzchak not see what Rebecca saw so clearly? That's just like a basic question. How could Yitzchak be deceived by Esav? Also, why is Yitzchak unable to see? That's basically the corollary of that question. The second question is Yaakov acting correctly in deceiving his father? And what's the point in getting a blessing if you're getting this blessing through deception? Another really basic question is, why doesn't Rebecca speak to Isaac? Why does she go to this method of deception? And what's the value in a blessing that's gained through deception? These are just some basic questions that I would like to address, but let me just pause for a second. We have so a couple of very good points that were made. First of all, why the food? Why the emphasis on food? Why does Yitzchak need food? And also, how much of this was orchestrated by God? So I guess to begin, and we're going to get back to answering those questions, we want to look at Rashi. Rashi discusses, first and foremost, why was Isaac blind? Why was Isaac unable to see? And we know that this is just a common literary technique, that if somebody in the book or the novel or the play is unable to see, I mean, there's something's blocking their sight. Something's preventing them from really seeing. And Yitzchak is really missing out on something that's the rest of the world sees. Although sometimes works the opposite, that the blind person is the one who could see with the most clarity. But here, Rashi says, why is Yitzchak blind? What led him to this? What led him to this state? So Rashi gives 3 explanations. First explanation is that Be'ashnan shel elu shahayu ma'ashnot u'maktirot avodah zarah. The first explanation is he became blind from the smoke of those who are worshiping idolatry. In the previous verse, it says that Esav took a wife from the Hittites, and her name is Yehudit bat Be'eri Achiti, and Basmat bat Elon Achiti. These were from the Canaanites, who Isaac was specifically not supposed to marry, but his son went ahead and married one of these women. And these women were married 2 of these women, and these women were making smoke for idolatry. And that smoke made Isaac unable to see. I want to come back to that in a second, but first let me share the other 2 explanations. Alternatively, when he was bound on the altar and his father wanted to slaughter him, at that moment, the gates of the heavens opened up, and the angels saw him crying, and their tears went down and fell on his eyes. And so therefore his eyes grew dim. And then there's a third approach, which was like Stanley was saying, and it was all orchestrated by God, so that Isaac went blind so that Jacob would be able to take the blessings. It was all part of God's plan to arrange this. So that third answer is what Stanley was saying, that God orchestrated this. And then we have to, again, that begs the question, Why did God orchestrate it that Jacob would take these blessings in such a challenging manner? This is somewhat problematic. He's stealing from his father. I mean, that's not it's never appropriate. Why is he doing that? So, okay, let's go back. Let's work backwards. The one that I don't want to focus on is the second answer of Rashi, which is that it was the spiritual trauma of the angel's tears going into his eyes. I don't really want to focus on that, but I do want to say just briefly that clearly what this midrash is referring to is the fact that Isaac had a spiritual trauma at the Akedah, and it might not have been visible to everybody, but it affected his sight for the rest of his life, and he saw things differently. And maybe because of this, we often admire what we're lacking. And so since he was passive at the Akedah, he passively allowed his father to bind him up. Maybe he admired that quality in Esau, that quality of being a hunter in the field. But the first answer is something I want to focus on for a second. And because there it says that he was blinded by the smoke of the wives of Esau. So then the question becomes, wait 1 second. If he's blinded by the smoke of the wives of Esau, what's an obvious question that we should all be thinking about? Well, if the smoke of Esau was so bad, the smoke of Esau's wives was so bad, then how come? What else should have happened? What else should have happened? How come Rebecca didn't get blind from that smoke? If the smoke of Esau's wives was so bad, how come Rebecca didn't get blind from that smoke? So, anybody ever think about that question? Not my question. It's a question that's asked by the Siftei Chachamim, one of the commentaries on Rashi. And his answer is that Rebecca was immune to the smoke. Why? Why would Rebecca have been immune to the smoke? Because she grew up in the house of idolaters. And so since she grew up in the house of idolaters, she was used to the smoke of idolatry, and she built up an immune system to it. Actually, let's see if Rabbi Yosef, if he's not walking, maybe he could pull up the Siftei Chachamim. I could read it with everybody. I don't know if he's still on here. Yeah. So since she had grown up, I don't know if you're able to do that, Rabbi Yosef, but since she had grown up in the house of idolaters, therefore she was immune to it. Okay, so what's the message there, though? What's the message of that approach? She was immune to it. So some commentaries want to say that what's the significance that Rebecca was immune? Rebecca was actually much more familiar with idolaters and with wickedness and with people. She wasn't the pie in the sky optimist that her husband Isaac was. So she could see the true nature of Esau because she grew up with a deceitful brother, and she was aware of what, don't be so naive as to trust whatever anybody says to you. And so Esau himself, the mother saw through him. Rebecca saw through him. Unlike Isaac, who was naive, accepting, innocent, he allowed his father to put him on the altar and bind him up without saying a word. Where is the sheep? Without saying a word, where's the sheep and the cattle? So it's totally totally different background, and that's why Rebecca was not blinded by the smoke of the wives of Asa, because she was used to it. You had a question, Bruce? I think that there's a lot of theories about what went on here. I like to suggest a different theory, one which views Rebecca and Isaac as having a very loving relationship. They don't need therapy. There's a real difference of opinion here. And the difference of opinion was, this is, there's so many rabbis who write about this that I don't really remember exactly who said what. So I'm just going to bring it all together in my own way of saying, but nothing that I'm saying is my own. This is all taken from different rabbis. That according to a major approach, Yitzhak knew Yaakov was spiritually pure, and he knew Esav was the man of the fields. He was no dummy, obviously. I shouldn't have to say that. But what he felt, and I could read in the Sephorno, what most parents want is their children to have a close relationship when they get older. And this goes back to the point of Bruce's question. Why did he want the food? Why did he want Esav to bring him food? He wanted to show to Esav that your trait of hunting should be brought into the spiritual for a blessing. You have to take your food, and your food can lead to the best blessings in the world. Through your strength, combined with Jacob, then we will have the dynamic duo, a great force. He saw that his two kids needed to work together to achieve a strength and a dynamism which neither one of them on their own could achieve. And so that's why he kept saying, bring me the food, and then I will bless you. The food is the spiritual. The food will enhance the spiritual. That's like on Shabbos. We don't just sit around and talk about how great God is. We eat a kigel, we eat some kichol, we have a schnapps. The food enhances the spiritual. Isaac Yitzhak wanted to show this to Esav. And what about Yaakov? And we'll come back to this. I want to show a source about saying this, about that was his approach to Esav. Why didn't Rivka just go to Yitzhak and say, listen, Esav can't do this. Yaakov has to be the one. To say that one child should be the CEO of the company, so to speak, or the head of the family, that's not saying that you're favoring a child. That's just saying that this is the child who's capable of doing this. You don't want to put somebody in a position. Can you imagine if Esau was the head of the Jewish people? It wouldn't work. Doesn't mean that she loved him any less. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. But why didn't she just say that to Yitzhak? First of all, we don't know that she didn't say it. We don't know that she didn't say it. But if you try telling somebody, this child, you try telling somebody that their child can't do what the parents think they could do. You ever try doing that? Parents will not believe it. Parents will say that their child can do anything. Mothers sometimes see things with greater clarity than fathers. And Yitzhak thought that Yaakov wasn't capable, not that he wasn't capable of being a great spiritual leader, but that he wasn't capable of getting this type of blessing. He wasn't capable of being a man in the field, a man, the businessman, the man who not only sat in the tent, but the man who was the man of the world. He just didn't think he could do it. So Rebecca's approach was to show that Yaakov could do it. And the only way she could show Yitzhak that Yaakov could do it was by deceiving Yaakov. Only by deceiving Yaakov, but not by deceiving Yitzhak. Only by manipulating Yitzhak into giving him the blessing would he realize, oh, this guy Yaakov is not who I thought he was. I thought he was some yeshiva bacher who just sat there studying the Gemara all day, unable to and he's always going to get his shirt taken in any business deal. Now I see he can do anything in the world. So if she had just told him, no, Yaakov has it in him, he never would have bought it. But she said, look, you don't think this guy can run the company? Look what he just did to you. He got you to give the blessing. He got you to give the blessing. So that's one of the theories as to why Rivka didn't just tell her husband. She had to show her husband. She had to show her husband. And the proof that this actually there is a lot of textual proof to this. First of all, the proof is that Yitzhak might have really known what was going on the whole time, because he said, "Your voice is the voice of Jacob, but your hands are the hands of Esav." And he says, "Let me come close. Let me feel you." And what does Yitzhak do when he hears that it was Esav and not Yaakov? I mean, that it was Yaakov and not Esav who got the blessing. What are the first words Yitzhak says? He doesn't. What are the first things he says? He doesn't curse Jacob for stealing the blessing. He doesn't curse him. The first words he says are Gam Baruch Yeh. He should also be blessed. It's almost like when God says to the children of after they bested him and by saying the Torah is not in heaven, God says Nitzchuni bana. He chuckled. My children have defeated me. He's like, oh, I didn't think it's almost like Yitzchak is saying, I didn't think that guy had it in him. Wow, he's also got this blessing. And so Yitzchak seeing what he's saying and saying, wow, Gam Baruch Yeh. He also has that blessing. So I feel like this story is a lot more complex than. I'm not saying that these are the best functioning families in the history of humanity. Obviously, if they were just normally functioning families, we wouldn't be reading about them. But these are archetypes. These are talking to us about the future. But clearly, just like we have to go deeper. And just to say, Rebecca favored that Isaac didn't like Jacob and Rebecca didn't like Esau. I think that's not deep enough. I think that there is a deeper here, and I know Thera has a point to add, but I just want to point out to you what Sephora's approach, because this is not me. This is a classic interpretation. What Sephorno says is, he says, what's the blessing? You will be a gavir to your brother. Isaac felt it would be good and sufficient. This is when he thinks he's blessing Esau, but he's really blessing Jacob. Isaac felt it would be good and sufficient for Jacob to have Eretz Yisrael as his possession and to live there with a measure of submissiveness, so as not to trouble himself with the demands of leadership or occupy himself with passing vanities, as indeed happened to his descendants later. He said, why do you want this blessing? He was saying, Jacob, you don't want this blessing. If you could go over to most kids today who are sitting there studying in a yeshiva, and their father is a big businessman, and the father is, let's say, a Fortune 500 CEO, and he's got one kid who's studying in yeshiva all day, and the other kid who's in business, and say to the yeshiva kid, no, we want you to take over the business. Say, I don't want that. I want to sit here and study the Talmud all day. Why do I have any interest in this? So that's what the blessing was. The blessing was you get to run the company. Jacob didn't, according to whatever Isaac knew about Jacob, A, didn't have any interest in that, and B, what made him think that he had the skill set to be able to do it? So that's why he has to say, he views it as this partnership, that Jacob will be studying, or Jacob will be the theologian in the tents, while Esau would be sitting there running the country, and together they would reach an incredible height. It was Rebecca who saw in Jacob the qualities to be the leader all on his own. That he had the whole package. That you can't just be. Rebecca understood you can't just be the man of the field without the man of the tent. Otherwise, you can't be the leader of our family. You need to have both qualities together. And she said Jacob has that quality within him. Hold on, let me pause for a second so that Thera can share with us her insight. Another point that's made, is that Yaakov was clearly uncomfortable with this. Yaakov was clearly uncomfortable with trying to deceive his father. So, it's been discussed, did Yitzhak know that this was really Yaakov coming before him? But another question is, was Yaakov indeed himself trying to not deceive his father? Was Yaakov indeed trying not to deceive his father? Because he clearly didn't want to listen to his mother, but his mother had to say to him, uh, Rivka said to his son, uh, in chapter 27, verse 8, now, my son, listen to my voice, to that which I am commanding you. I'm commanding you. I'm commanding you. This is a commandment from a mother. And then she says, go to the sheep and take from me the goats. And then Jacob still doesn't want to do it. He says, my brother is hairy. Maybe he will touch me. And the word maybe here, the commentaries of Vilna Gaon points out that the word for maybe is ulai. And there are different words in Hebrew for perhaps. There's pen and ulai. The word pen is something you don't want to happen, but ulai is something that you do want to happen. Perhaps. So Jacob is like praying that his father will discover his deception. He's praying that his father will discover his deception because he doesn't want to be dishonest. The quality of Jacob that people know is the quality of honesty. Jacob, titain emes Yaakov, you give truth to Jacob. And now we come to Rebecca commands him to wear the clothing of Esav. She says, I will accept the curse. Jacob has no choice. She does everything. But there's one thing she cannot control. Jacob refuses to deceive his father. So he does everything his mother said, but his mother didn't say to him, speak in the voice of Esav. His mother didn't say that. So maybe that was the way in which Jacob revealed himself to his father. He says, Hakol kol Yaakov vayadayim Esav. The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esav. Maybe that was Jacob's way of saying to his father, listen, I can't deceive you. This is who I am. Jacob was struggling, but once he did this deception, there was no going back. I just want to share one other approach before we take Joyce's question. I was reading the commentary of Rabbi Daniel Feldman, and he shared a very, very moving story by I think it's Yisachar Techtel, who's the author of Ema Banim's Mecha, which is a work that was written in the Warsaw Ghetto and then buried and found after the Shoah by those who survived him. And he died in the concentration camp. And he said, well, if God is going to give all these blessings to Jacob anyway, why did he need these blessings? And he said, he was reading this passage and he had this insight when he was in the Warsaw Ghetto, and he saw the Nazis come along. And even though the Jews had a little bit of rations, they took those rations, they stole those rations also. And he said he had this insight that the point is that sometimes we have to fight for every blessing. That the blessings don't come. The message is that sometimes the blessings aren't going to come, directly. We have to be fighting for the blessings. And he had this insight while seeing this, that Esav represents the idea that the nations of the world are somehow going to deceive everybody and get blessings, and it's our responsibility to fight for those blessings. Not all the blessings are going to be given straight to us. That's another way in which this passage was read. Hold on one second. Let me take Joyce's question. Yes, Joyce. I know we said a lot of things. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss here. I just want to close with, I guess, it's my prerogative to get the last word. Joyce said that Yaakov said, I am Esav, your firstborn. And that was like a bold lie. And Joyce is right, that does present a huge textual problem. And there are commentaries who see that he did something terrible and he was punished for it for eternity. But that's not how Rashi sees it. Rashi sees that Yaakov, even at that moment, knew he had to say what he said, but he still tried to say it by keeping his dignity and not lying. And he says, Anochi amei vilecha. It is I who is bringing you the food, but Esav is your firstborn by birth. Rashi puts the comma or the period in a way to make Jacob not being a liar. That's a difficult thing. How could he do that? I mean, it sounds a little bit Clinton-esque. That's when depends where you put the comma, etc. But the idea is that Jacob knew he had to do what he had to do. It was a question of what his mother had told him to do. But even when you do something which you know is hard, you have to figure out a way in your own mind to try and maintain your level of honesty and integrity to the best that you can. And so, yeah, that was a difficult moment for Jacob, but that's because he literally had no choice at that point. He was choice between the Talmudic question, who do you honor, your mother or your father, if they both tell you to do opposite things. Jacob, that's what Jacob was being told at that point. So he thought by honoring his mother, eventually his father would agree with him. And that actually turned out to be the correct thing because his father in the end did give him the blessing. Did give him the blessing. That's the problem with all due respect, that's the problem with Joyce's theory because Isaac in the end did bless Jacob, did give him the full-throated blessing, and he didn't turn his back on him. So this is obviously we're not going to solve this issue today, but this is always important to talk about. And God willing, next year we'll come back with even more theories. All right, everybody is always amazing, always enriching.